Hi, I'm Dr. Tai Elliott, Program Director here at Southern Regional Area Health Education Center, and today I'm going to talk to you about interviewing medical students in the time of COVID. This lecture was previously just interviewing medical students, but given that we're in COVID, we added in an aspect of virtual interviewing also. So kind of our goals and objectives for today, we're going to discuss the program's role in the interview process, discuss the metrics that are often used for evaluating, interviewing, and ranking applicants, and then also discuss the virtual interviewing process and understanding and knowing the illegal interview questions, because we want to make sure that you do not ask any of those illegal questions and get your program into any issues. So always, when we're at the interview process, we always talk about determining, what is the right applicant. But first, the role is the programs to set the standards of what is considered a proper applicant for, or someone who they feel will be a good resident for their residency program. So the program first must kind of develop and review the mission statement to ensure that as you're beginning the interview process, that you are staying with your mission and your focus of your program to ensure that you're recruiting those residents that are going to allow you to be able to meet your mission. Also, the second aspect is really important, that the program educates the faculty and all of the residents who are going to be participating in the interview process. So therefore, kind of developing forums or developing committees of individuals who are going to actively participate in the interview process and ensuring that everyone understands the mission of the program, understands what each program is looking for in an applicant, and what each program feels is important that will allow them to meet the program's mission when recruiting applicants. Also, the other aspect to try to help reduce some of the internal biases that can occur with the interview process is developing and creating a kind of a comprehensive rubric metric and ensuring that each interviewer understands that rubric metric and understands how to go about scoring the applicants on the rubric. And then the other aspect is to ensure that most of the interviewers and along with faculty and residents have had some training on implicit biases because we want to make sure that you are reducing those implicit biases that can oftentimes occur during the interview process. So for instance, someone may have a bias that a certain university or a certain school will produce better applicants than others, or that allopathic physicians may produce better applicants than osteopathic medical schools. So some of those things are we need to all have come in with an understanding and a foundation of some implicit biases that we all may have and how to reduce those implicit biases. So oftentimes when we talk about the interview process, there's some standard interview metrics that are utilized, typically your USMLE or CONLEX scores. The USMLE and CONLEX is not highly diagnostic of how an applicant will do during residency, but it does kind of give us an overall look at likely how the resident will do on the next board that they may take, or their in-service training exam. And sometimes the USMLE and CONLEX can be used, unfortunately, against the applicant without realizing that it's not a true indicator of resident performance. Then also there's the MSPE that's generated by the medical school. Now, the issue with the MSPE is oftentimes most medical schools are going to try to sell their their schools. They want to ensure that they maintain a good reputation, and they may not provide any negative aspects about the applicant. And so oftentimes those are going to provide kind of more of a halo effect, is what you can kind of think of with the MSPE. Then of course the letters of references are typically going to be someone the applicant has reached out to generate that letter of reference for them. And one of the things that we are seeing with our letters of references are that there is a discrepancy in how some letters of references are written for women versus men. Oftentimes we're seeing more emotional type verbiage used, like compassionate terminology such as that, instead of more of the examples for men. So there can be some biases associated with terminology for women versus men, and then also we see that translated ethnically too, where we're seeing some differences in verbiage for particularly African American applicants. So you want to be mindful of that when you're looking at your letters of reference. Now the audition rotation is actually a great place for residency programs to really engage and be able to see the quality of applicant that they have, because you've had the opportunity to work closely with the applicant, you've had the opportunity to see their work ethic, ability to see how their performance is under possibly stressful situations, and just kind of their interactions with patients. And then also, you as a resident, you're able to see, well, how would they fit in with my core group here of other residents. Also, the other area that we take a look at sometimes is kind of the ties to the area. That really is going to allow you to really kind of see what is the likelihood possibly of the applicant remaining in the area upon graduation, and then also possibly the applicant's interest and familiarity to the area, so you're not having to sell the area so much, because you know they already have a tie to the area and have a desire to be in the location of your residency program. And then of course your personal statement. When you're looking at the personal statement, you really are trying to figure out, well, what is this individual's link to family medicine, or what is it to whatever specialty they are applying to, and what is their commitment, and allows you to get a glimpse of them and possibly their life story and what drew them into medicine and into the specialty area that they've decided to apply into. So as you can see here, some of the top skills or aspects that the program director is utilizing are interpersonal skills, interactions with faculty, and then also resident feedback are all aspects that we would see on that audition rotation with the applicants. And so last year and again this year, that is hindered because of many of the applicants are not able to do their audition rotations, and therefore we're utilizing more of the kind of letters of recommendations, individuals' personal statements. So those are some of the things you kind of want to keep in mind. But despite the information I provided you in regards to COMLEX scores and USMLE scores, they still are rated pretty high on the aspects that residency program directors look at, even above the personal statements of some of the applicants. But, like I just told you, the AAMC, they made a statement in 2020, and really in the statement they were promoting that most of our interviews should occur virtually, either be it by some online process or by telephone. And here at our residency program, we decided to do all of our interviews via the platform of Zoom. And so it's really important that, and I see that we'll likely continue to utilize these methods as we continue to interview, and so hence the reason that we put in some information in regards to virtual interviews. So, what are some main tips when you are beginning to think about video conferencing and utilizing for interviewing applicants? Before the interview, really one of the things that we emphasize here is that we maintain a neutral background, where it's a white background or a background that is not eye-catching, that allows the applicant to maintain their focus on you, and allows for you to be able to have that communication without any distractions. Also, you want to make sure that your camera is placed a little higher so that it appears as if you're looking and maintaining good eye contact with the applicant. You want to make sure that all of your phones and other applications are closed during the process of the interview to decrease distractions also. Now, during the interview, you also want to make sure that although you may be doing this interview in the comfort of your home because your program director may have allowed you to do them at home, you still want to show up professionally for the interview process while interviewing the applicant, and put forth your best effort and really represent your program, and show the applicant that you have a vested interest in them coming to your program. The other aspect to try to help reduce some of the biases that we discussed, those implicit biases, is really and typically developing standardized questions, and that's where the committee that may be formed by the program director will come together and develop typically social or behavioral type questions that can be answered by the applicant during the interview day, and it allows for the reduction in some biases that may occur with some of the questions, and we'll go into those. And then, really those situational or behavioral type questions really allow you to be able to evaluate how the applicant is answering. And so one of the acronyms that you can utilize is called the STAR acronym, where it's like a situation or a task. Did the applicant actually describe the context for the event? So if you ask them a situational question, were they actually able to provide you with a situation? Were they able to describe an event for you? Then also, like if there's an action question, did the applicant describe the act of how they did during on a rotation? If you ask them a question about a rotation, how did they move forward and act during that process? And then if you're asking them for kind of results, did they provide you with the outcome? So if you ask them what change did they make on the rotation, then you would expect to hear what were the results of the change that they made and how did it impact them moving forward on the rotation. One of the main things is when you're interviewing applicants is how do you go about gathering their answers? One, you don't want to be writing profusely and not maintaining good eye contact with the applicant. You still want it to be an engaging conversation. So the recommendation is really for you to jot down some of the information that they are saying to you. It will allow you to make kind of an objective evaluation of the documentation, of the answers that they provide you. It does not have to be verbatim, and you can really record some of the keywords or processes that the applicant tells you about. Some of the things that you want to kind of avoid is trying to make inferences about what the applicant said. So for instance, if the applicant gives you an example, don't write, oh, bad answer, or something, oh, great answer, something to that effect. You just kind of want to write down exactly key aspects of what the applicant told you that will allow you to go back and review the information and provide you the ability to kind of make an objective decision after you've had the opportunity to sit and listen to everything that the applicant has said. Because when you write a bad answer, that can provide kind of an avenue for you to now judge every answer that the applicant gives you negatively. So you don't want to develop a halo effect or a pitchfork effect on the applicant. And then also, you don't want to signal to the applicant that their answer is either negative or positive. So what do I mean by that? You are only taking notes when the applicant, you agree with what the applicant has said, and you're giving head nodding gestures and then writing down, and that lets the applicant know, okay, yes, they are agreeing with me. But just kind of, you want to try to maintain an objectivity and neutrality during the aspect of doing the interview process, just kind of jotting down the answers, but not writing profusely, as I said earlier. So one of the reasons that I highly recommend, going back to your program and really discussing, should we have structured or unstructured questions? I'm a big proponent of having those structured questions because unstructured questions results in kind of that homophilia where you and I enjoy basketball, and so we sit and we chat a little bit about basketball, or I enjoy running long distance and the applicant enjoys running long distance. So we find that commonality about each other, and then therefore it makes it possibly difficult for other interviewers who may not have that same commonality with the applicant. You want to ensure that you are giving each applicant the opportunity to answer questions that are really going to allow you to assess their ability to encounter various instances during their time in the residency. Also, unstructured questions increases your opportunities for possibly asking some of those inappropriate or illegal questions, which we'll get to a little later on in this lecture. And then one of the things that we are trying to reduce with structured questions is the implicit bias, which we see a lot more in those unstructured questions, because again, you have that homophilia or that commonality that comes about, and it raises the ability for you to have that conversation about various topics that you feel comfortable with. So some of the things that you really want to, when you're doing your interview questions, is really target their interest in family medicine or whatever specialty they're going into. I use family medicine obviously because I'm a family medicine physician. What is their interest in the residency or the program? What do they know about the program, and what has drawn their attention to your residency program? And then some of the questions that you may encounter and that you want to think about that you may receive as a chief resident during the interview process is, why did you choose this program, your program? And then why are you happy with your choice? And really being able to verbalize how you feel about your program and being objective and also being truthful about your answers to the applicant. And then some other questions that most applicants are going to want to know about is, what are the typical work hours, also your graduation plans, and then do you feel that you have been well trained in the residency program that you're at? And then oftentimes the other questions that applicants will ask about are there any changes to the program on the horizon that you might know of? one of the main aspects is that you want to make sure that your interview is timely and within the time constraints that has been set forward by your residency program. So you want to make sure that you allow time to thank the applicant for their time during the interview process. And you don't want to immediately provide the applicant back feedback. This is not the time for you to give them feedback on their interview process. You just really want to thank them for their time and then kind of direct them to the next location that they're going to go to. One of the things I've seen is that sometimes people have shared their notes with the applicant. I again highly discourage doing that. It's not recommended at all. What you should be doing is kind of providing what are the next steps in the interview, where they're going to next, and if there's any further information. Are they going to meet with you if they're meeting for lunch that afternoon, or if they're meeting for dinner or a wrap-up session? That's when you can provide them with that information. But you should not share any of your notes. So then, once you have finished interviewing the applicant, one of the things that we did here this year at our program, we built in time to allow each interviewer immediately after interviewing an applicant the time to kind of process through, evaluate, and take a look at their notes. And while it's fresh on their mind, going ahead and making information and documenting the kind of impression that they had from their interview with the applicant, because that allows you to provide real time and doesn't allow for that separation from the time of the interview. And then you want to ensure that you have the rubric that you've already gotten plenty of education on from your program prior to, on how to complete the rubric, and go ahead and score the documentation. And I would say doing that in a timely fashion would most definitely help you and allow you the opportunity to really reflect upon the applicant that you've interviewed. So then, as you've already heard me talk about that there are biases that are associated with the interview process. Everyone has biases, and so it's really important that we be aware of our own bias, and that one of the things you want to do is you want to try to mitigate those biases. After you are acknowledged, first of all, that you have them, because we all do, you want to be kind of aware of those strong reactions that you have and allow yourself that time to pause, think through, and just acknowledge, okay, possibly this might be a bias on my behalf, and really trying to maintain objectivity when evaluating the applicant. You want to base your scores on deliberate thinking and decision making. Don't make inferences on, well, I think she or he was trying to say this. No, you have to listen to exactly what the applicant said to you, and then you want to make decisions off of that information. You do not want to make inferences from the information, from possibly what was stated. So some of the common rating errors that we may encounter is really that halo effect that I talked about earlier, where you allow one question to influence all of the other answers. One answer to one of the questions that the applicant provides you to influence all other answers that they may provide. So you think, wow, that was a really great answer, and then from that point on, nothing else the applicant says could be wrong. So you want to make sure that you stay away from that halo or the horn effect. Also is that central tendency where you evaluate the person and you always put the applicant in the middle. You really need to make sure that you are evaluating each applicant at the time of the interview, shortly after, and really making a decision. Does this fall low or does this fall high on our rubric? You want to ensure that you're not always rating individuals in that middle portion. And then there's also the leniency and the severity. So you got those individuals who are always thinking everyone is great and giving the high score versus those who are much harder interviewers and giving a harsher score. So you want to make sure that you're fair in your scoring. And then also you don't want to compare your applicants between each other. So you interview applicant A and then you have applicant B, and you compare applicant B to the prior applicant. You want to look at each applicant as they're coming and interview them in regards to how did they answer the questions, where do they fall on the rubric, and that's really called that contrast effect. So now there are some questions that you should not be asking applicants when you're interviewing them. So I know some of you probably know some of those questions, but we'll go over them here. So some of those demographic questions that you don't want to ask are about age, race, their religion, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation. Those are all off-limits questions, and these are all actually, I have another slide where they were actually being asked by a lot of the applicants during their interview process. They report that they have been asked some of these inappropriate questions, but it's really important that you ensure that you do not ask them those demographic or family type questions. What is their native language, or what is the composition of their family? Are they married, single? Do they have children? Are they planning on having children? Those are all questions that could be seen as increasing the likelihood of discrimination against our applicants. Other forbidden questions are in regards to personal height, weight, and disabilities. And then are they applying to other specialties or other programs? We cannot ask. And then of course, where will they rank your program in the final ranking aspect? Interestingly, as I just stated earlier, there was a survey that was done on medical students, and that survey did find that approximately about 30% of medical students reported they did receive some of these forbidden questions. They were asked some of these questions while they were out on the interview, while they were out being interviewed by programs. So you want to make sure that you stay away from those questions. All right, thank you very much.